We had one little kid from Halloween a few years ago when, it first started happening. And he says, all the neighbors say you're Siri. And I said, yes, I am. He said, you don't sound like Siri. And I said, how about now?
Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works. If you're enjoying what you're hearing in this podcast, can you please take a moment and leave a 5-star review at the platform where you're listening to let others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. I would so appreciate that. Thank you so much. Today we are indeed joined by Susan Bennett, the original voice of Siri. She's moved from one gig to the next her entire working life. And with the explosion these days of all things AI, her story is timely. It's a cautionary tale of knowing what you're signing and what that could mean for you in the future. Susan talks about the process of recording the voice of Siri and what that journey's been like. Her story serves as a valuable lesson for saying yes when we're presented with new opportunities. Now here is my conversation with the original voice of Siri, Susan Bennett. Well, welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, juggling 2 or 3 or more side hustles instead of having one full-time job as an employee is increasingly becoming more common. Looking at your work history, Susan, it seems that that's all you've ever known is life in the gig economy. Did you ever have a full-time job as an employee?
No.
No.
Never. Not
Really?
ever. Nope. Yeah, I've always been a freelancer. And I guess if there were any kind of regular job is when I had a private event band. And so I was the booker and the payer and the singer and keyboard player and
Oh, wow.
all that. And did that for many, for 20 years, about 20 to 25 years.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the most consistent
Okay.
job I had. And then, when I did break into voiceover, and I did a lot of commercial voiceover when I first broke in years ago.
Right.
So, but it was all, as you say, gig based. It was all
Yeah.
just a one-off kind of thing, mostly. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've been involved in music all your life. Was that the plan from the get-go, graduating out of high school? It's like, I'm going to be in a band and follow that route? No?
No, I'd always been musical. I played, our next door neighbor gave me his piano when he was moving because at 4 years of age, he heard me playing on a little toy piano. He heard me picking out tunes
Wow.
on a toy piano, and he called my parents. He said, I think you have a musical child. I want her to have my piano. He said, oh, thank you very much.
Nice.
So I took him like 12 years of classical piano lessons, and I never really, I guess growing up when I did, it didn't even occur to me that you could have a career as a musician.
Okay.
It's not something that I was conscious of.
Yeah.
And so when I went off to college, I sang in a cappella group there, and I also got involved in my first band. That's how I made some money for college in the summers, was to play in that band.
Nice. And so music has always been part of your life then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how did you discover voiceover?
Well, it sort of discovered me.
Okay.
I was a jingle singer a lot in the 70s and even 80s. And one day in I guess must have been mid to late 70s, I was at a recording studio in Atlanta called Doppler, and they were a really big deal for a while. They're no longer in existence, but they were like the big deal at the time. And I had been singing a jingle with a group of singers. And when we were finished, the voice actor was supposed to read the copy for the spot, and he or she, whoever that was, didn't show up.
Oh, wow.
So the owner of the studio said, Susan, you don't have an accent. Come over here and read this copy. And so I just went, oh, ding, 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 I can do this, because I did it sort of instinctively, and it was easy for me to do. So I just thought, wow. So I got a coach and then a talent agent, and that was that.
Great.
Yeah.
With the jingles, that would be for radio ads?
Yeah.
TV
radio
ads?
and TV ads. Yeah.
So this was kind of a natural progression then.
Yeah, it really was.
Well, since that time, you have developed such a wide range of voices, like from a McDonald's commercial to being a voice in the airport for Delta Airlines to all your character voice work. How did you develop such a variety of voices?
It came naturally, a lot of the voices that I did. And throughout the years, I'd taken acting classes and voiceover coaching and that sort of thing. And sadly, there's not that much work for character voices. And commercially, there used to be. We used to do a lot of. It was so much fun. All the voice actors involved in the spot would get in the studio together, work off each other, and it was fabulous. And now, of course, we've all been imprisoned by our booths for the last 25 years, so we don't have that same experience. Yeah, I just did it just out of experimentation. It sort of came natural. I think a lot of it had to do with my musical ear. I think being able to do different voices has a lot to do with what you hear, and how well you can imitate the sounds you hear.
What's been one of your favorite voices?
My favorite of all time, darling, is Shaka Cohen. And darling, I do it all. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, the whole thing, darling. Call me.
Oh, that's fun.
I don't get much call for Shaka, though.
No.
She's my favorite, though.
Yeah, but if you love voices, wouldn't animation be part of that?
Yes, and after the Siri thing, and I had an opportunity to get a big-time agent in Los Angeles, I talked to him about that, and he said, basically, we've got this little group of incredibly talented people here in LA, and they do it all. And he said, if you'd like to move here and work your way in. And at that stage of the game, I was in my mid to late 60s, and I said, I don't know about that.
Right, yeah.
I've done a few things here in Atlanta for, Cartoon Network and that sort of thing, Turner animation stuff. But
do you have a favorite client you've worked for?
A favorite client?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't think of anyone really specifically. I just know that I, for one, just love to work. I love to work. And so unless the person is obnoxious, at that time, that's my favorite person.
Right.
Who's just hired me. So, yeah.
Well said.
There are a lot of really great people. And of course, a lot of people and the engineers, too. And it's funny, the number of engineers who become voice actors.
Really?
Yeah, I know several who have done that and become very successful. Yeah, it's all related. It all a lot of it has to do with the ears.
Well, I could kind of see that because the engineer's working away, listening to all these voice actors, and then one point he or she's going to think, I could be doing this. Plus, I can engineer my work.
And
right?
that I have a good friend that did that. He was a fabulous voice actor, and he's been an audio engineer just forever. And I said, so you are the millennial man. Got it all.
Well, how in the world did you end up being the original voice of Siri?
Well, I don't really know. I know that someone chose my voice out of this huge bank of voices. And I like to think it was Steve Jobs just because he was so involved in the development of the Siri app. That was his baby. That was his deal. And the sad thing about it is that there were 4 original Siri voices. I was the North American voice. There was an Australian voice, British voice, and I think the 4th one was French.
Okay.
And I've been in touch with the Australian voice, Karen Jacobson, who lives in New York City. She's wonderful, very talented woman. And the British voice, Daniel, instead of Siri over there, is John Briggs. And he's a pretty famous BBC announcer.
Okay.
And in fact, he actually came to the United States, and he came down to Atlanta to visit. So it was really fun.
Nice.
But the first 4 voices did not get paid by Apple. And I think it's because they got our voices from this company, Nuance, for whom we had done these crazy recordings years before. And we were all told those crazy recordings were just, it's just generic phone messaging stuff. Don't worry about it.
Really?
I don't worry about it. Then 6 years later, we're Siri, and we're going, what happened? So we weren't paid because I think they probably felt they'd already paid for the voice, buying our voices from this company, Nuance.
Got it.
And so the advantage that we had is that we didn't get paid, which meant we did not have a non-disclosure agreement, which meant we could promote ourselves.
Got it. Yeah.
And so there ended up being a very big plus side for me because I turned it into a new career. I started to do speaker events, which was really, really fun. It was a lot of fun there for 2 or 3 years. And then COVID reared its ugly head and changed the world and changed my career. And thank you, COVID. So yeah, it was all of it has been sort of organic. A lot of it, the Siri thing was a huge life lesson, really, for me, because when I first found out it was my voice, I was horrified.
Sure.
October 4th, 2011 is when Siri appeared.
Okay.
Yes, she's a Libra. And
For all you people that asked.
that's right. That's right. That's why she wants everybody to be happy, and they never are. Yes, a fellow voice actor emailed me and said, "Hey, we're playing around with this new iPhone app. Isn't this you?" And I went, "What?"
Wow.
So I went on the Apple site and listened, and I went, "Yes, that's me." And you don't hear your voice on something that big without having auditioned for it, or
Mhm.
your agent called you and you were in touch with the directors and the producers and all this stuff. Nothing. It was just crickets. And to this day, it's crickets. I have not heard one word from Apple. And so consequently, I talked to a bunch of lawyers, and they read the one little, thing that I signed when I was doing the original recordings. And said, no, there's nothing you can do. And so I had to talk myself out of being upset and just say, this is what it is. And so you can just go around hating yourself the rest of your life and being miserable, or you can figure out a way to use this somehow.
Yeah, to leverage it.
Flip it to your advantage in some way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I don't blame anybody. And I guess I'm very flattered that my voice was chosen. And the Siri thing has been a lot of fun for me. It's enabled me to go to these amazing conferences and visit a lot of different countries. And
yeah,
so it's turned out to be good.
So when you got the job, number one, it wasn't from Apple. It was from this company, Nuance.
Mm-hmm.
As far as you knew nothing of Apple's involvement then or into the future. So what was it that you were recording? Like sentences or words?
I was recording sentences that were created to get all of the sound combinations in the language. And so, as you can possibly surmise, not of any of these sentences really made sense.
Okay.
They were worrying about sounds. They weren't worrying about content. So I was reading sentences like, say, schist, fresh issue today. Cathexis fepitali, sexual ease stump.
Really?
Yeah, militia oi hallucinate, buckra okra ooze. And then there were the, mind-numbingly repetitive things. Say the shrouding again, say the shredding 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 again, and kill me now.
Really? Wow. How long did this take?
Well, the initial recordings were in July of 2005, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Of doing that?
Yes.
Wow.
I took a lot of breaks. Yeah, it was very, very tedious stuff. And, the first couple hundred were interesting because it was a challenge.
Yeah.
It had to be, because they were going to do this process called concatenation, where they would go into the recordings, extract the sounds they needed, reform them into new phrases and sentences, and put them on whatever device they wanted. Because they were doing that, we just couldn't speak, as humans, we speak like this, and if something good is happening, we might go like that, or we change the pitch of our voice, or the force of our voice. And so all of this had to be read very, 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 and not quite monotone, but definitely all in the same pitch, the same level, the same basic sound, and pacing, all of that stuff. And so it was pretty tedious from that point of view. Yeah.
I was going to say there probably was days where you're trying to keep yourself awake.
Yeah.
And that went on for a month.
Yes. And then they did follow up for 4 months, but that was just reading street addresses.
Oh, man. Now, how much fun is that?
Very, very dull person at that time.
I was going to say, being so creative and having all these voices, and then you had to keep this monotone tone.
How are you doing? Oh, I'm doing very well. How are you?
No. I want the Susan version, not the
real
Siri
Susan,
version.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So your understanding at that time, then, it was going to be used for something like a telephone voice service or something like that.
That I never would have heard.
Right.
Just and for that type of voice work, the messaging type of thing, most people don't recognize your voice because they're listening for information. Now, unless you have a crazy voice or you're a celebrity voice or something, they're not going to really notice your voice. They're just listening to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That all changes when, you speak to a phone that you're in the palm of your hand like 20 hours a day, and you're speaking to this voice, and you know that voice. You become familiar with that voice. And so there's really no way of measuring how all of that impacted my voiceover career.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's been one of your most humorous or fun times that you've had being Siri?
Well, the fun things were traveling,
Okay.
and meeting people. And it always is surprising to me that, and even to this day, I still get mail every week asking for autographs and stuff. It's like, really? It's no
Aw.
longer my voice. You do realize that. I think that that's the most fun and the funniest things is just meeting people in those conferences, and they're just going, "Oh, they're Siri. I did the voice for Siri," But probably one of the most notable things that happened at a Siri conference was I met Steve Wozniak,
Very cool.
or Woz, Steve Jobs' partner and the actual builder of the first Macintosh computer and many subsequent ones, I'm sure. And he now has a speaker career.
Okay.
And so that's how ran into him at this conference. And he called me up on stage and we talked and everything. And afterwards he says, "You're good at this. You're good on stage." He said, "You should do this." And I said, "Yeah." And so I went home and started writing a presentation. And for a while I was going to try to piggyback with him. I would be the opening act for him.
Okay.
But he charges so much money that no one was interested in having an opening act. He said, "Well, we'll supply the opening act for free." Just So, yeah, I started to do speaker events thanks to him.
He was the one that gave you the encouragement.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
did. And even the idea, it never would have occurred to me to do that. And so I'm very grateful to him.
Have you ever had anybody say to you something along the lines of, "Voice is Siri? Yeah, right, prove it"?
We had one little kid for Halloween a few years ago when, it first started happening.
Yeah.
And he says, "All the neighbors say you're Siri." And I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "You don't sound like Siri." And I said, "How about now?"
I love that. This look of
Grabbed his
disbelief.
candy and ran.
Okay, so you mentioned that since that time, they've brought in other voice actors and it's now a new Siri voice. When it was yours, did you ever use it?
Nope.
Yeah, that would have been kind of
I spoke to her once and she
Okay.
was a little bit snarky. That was kind of the fun thing about the original Siri. She had attitude. Sometimes people would talk to her just to see what she would say back to them.
Okay.
And so I thought, well, I've just got to experience this. So I said, "Hi, Siri, what are you doing?" And she very disgustedly responded, "I'm talking to you." Okay, sorry to bother you.
Pardon me.
Yeah, pardon me. Or pardon you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has there been a downside to being Siri?
I think the downside is something that I don't really know about. The downside would be that my voice has become so ubiquitous that people might think to use my voice and they'll go, "Oh no, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that Siri voice."
Mm.
And it doesn't really sound like me. I mean,
No.
you can hear certain things sound familiar, but it's my speaking voice is definitely not the original Siri voice.
Right.
But as if there's no way to measure how much work I lost because of that. I just don't really know. But, I just don't choose to look at it that way. It's something that happened, which I was partially responsible for, actually, signing that particular contract that I signed. And,
That's a good lesson.
I want to warn people that are doing this type of stuff to make sure that you're getting paid for it and getting paid well, because they can use it ad infinitum. Once they have it, goodbye. So as I said, it was a life lesson, but I just chose not to think negatively about it.
And I suppose perhaps too that there's the possibility that you got some work because of it, because you said that your speaking voice isn't that exact match with the voice of Siri, but
Yeah.
sort of enough that maybe on some unconscious level there's a familiarity there.
Yeah, I don't really know. No one's actually really mentioned that to me, but I just look at it. Siri gave me a whole brand new career.
Well, you mentioned that because of the circumstances at the time, you didn't sign a non-disclosure agreement, so you could talk about it. But that didn't happen till, I guess, 2013. So I guess that was a couple of years later.
Yeah, it was 2 whole years before I could. I mean, I was so horrified for the first bit that I didn't know what to do about it. So I spent that time talking to lawyers and talking to my agents and saying, what can I do? And they're kind of going. The interesting thing is that it was the first one, and so there was no precedent for it.
Right.
What would happen using someone's voice and how much. Now that the bots are going to take over, I don't really know where we're all going to stand after that.
Well, I was going to ask you how you see AI impacting the voiceover industry?
Oh, I think it's going to impact it greatly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to impact every business. I mean, at this point in time, AIs can write books, not to say they're good books,
Right.
but they can write books. I mean, you just program the information into the AI and it writes a book. I hope that the millennials, the techie millennials have fun with it for a while. And then it's sort of like, well, we can't really get those human rhythms exactly right, and I'm really hoping that they can't. Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak both have come out to say, you might want to put the brakes on the AI, but you just know that, humans being humans, the good people will put the brakes on and the bad people will keep doing it. So I think it's just something we're going to have to figure out how to embrace in our lives. It's right now it's kind of a horrifying thing. I just don't like the idea of it at all. But things progress and you have to move along with them or get lost in the dust. So
it seems kind of a natural then the next reiteration of the voice of Siri would be done by AI.
Yep.
Because it's got that same kind of tone.
And that's where they got all the voices anyway from. I bet they got the original voices from Nuance, but now they've got AI that can replicate any voice they want. So I think the best thing that you can do is be positive and embrace the change, because nothing is ever going to come your way by trying to cut someone else down or trying to make more of yourself and less of someone else. You just need to be a good person, do a great job, show up on time. I mean, the little things that people remember about you will be those things.
Yeah.
And if you're the opposite of that, they'll remember you and they will throw your card away.
Yes.
Or your MP3 or whatever they're playing with.
And if you're in that positive state that you described, then you're in a better vibe, a better mental state to see those opportunities and be in a position to say yes.
Yeah. All of this happy Miss Sunshine thing is, I have to talk to myself about that too, because it's, if you're used to doing something and then someone else gets the job, or they're cutting back and so they don't give you as many hours or what, those are things that can be distressing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that also you face them differently at different stages in your life. I mean, I've been doing this since the early 70s.
Wow.
So
yeah.
So if I don't win every job, it's sort of like, well, it's their turn now, I guess, and so I try to, embrace all that. And I'm always trying to look on the positive side, because I was raised by a pretty negative dad, especially, but you can't blame them. They lived through a flu pandemic, 2 world wars, and a major depression. So they had reason to be concerned about life.
That's really interesting, because some people with parents, the parents show them how to live and that's who they become, or in other cases, like what you've just described, how not to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is too, all those experiences that you've had have all stacked on one another, so that when you got to the point of being on stage with Wozniak and he turns to you later and says, you know what, you're really good at this, you should be doing this, then you've got the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
And that
right.
opened up a whole new world.
Yeah. You brought up a very good point. The fact that he complimented me made a big impression on me. And I think that anybody that's listening to your show, any way that you can encourage other people, a kind word, an encouraging word, a compliment, you have no idea what that might do for that particular person. That person might have been on the verge of just saying, okay, I quit. I can't do this.
Yeah. Or worse.
Yeah, or worse.
Yeah.
And just say, someone said, yeah, God, you got a great voice. And I do. And suddenly it's like, you don't listen to those the little devil on your shoulder. Yeah, throw that guy right off.
So true. Plus, when you're the one delivering the compliment too, and it's sincere, doesn't that make you feel great?
Oh, yes.
Because you're seeing that beautiful aspect in that other person.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're resonating with that too.
And it's funny too, because I think that, nowadays, some of the niceties that used to be emphasized when I was growing up, and the courtesies are things that we're seeing less of now. And boy, oh boy, those things are just it's like the lubricant of life. Mm-hmm. Please, thank you. Hello, how are you doing? Lubricants of life. I mean, learn to do those things for people. I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and I drove up to the valet guy and I said, hi, how are you doing? He didn't say anything. And I gave him this sort of look, and he said, what? I said, hello, you were stuck for an answer. nice. Be nice, especially if you're working for tips.
That's right. Yeah.
As this guy was.
All
I
right,
gave him
yeah.
a nice tip, and I bet he thought I wouldn't give him anything. So,
Right. Well, what's the best place for our listeners to connect with you, Susan?
well, I do have a website at susancbennett.com, and you can actually send me an email via the website if you want to. You can also look up all kinds of stuff. Just Google voice of Siri.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically probably the best way. I mean, I do respond to all of my emails.
Terrific.
Unless you're being mean. I don't respond to mean.
You and me both. I'll definitely have that website in the show notes.
Great. And I do have a presence on social media. I can't say that I'm very good at checking it, but the handle is at Seriously, and that's SIRIOUSLY, Susan, SUSAN. And that's for Twitter and Instagram.
I'll put that in there as well.
At Seriously Susan.
Well, you've carved out a career going from one gig to the next and have experienced some major pivots. Clearly, you know how to take action. What's your best tip, Susan, to inspire others to move the needle forward on their side hustle dream?
Don't listen to that little thing in your brain that's telling you you don't know what you're doing, you can't do it. Surprising if you read about some of these different celebrities and they just said, "Oh, I didn't know what I was doing. I just said yes." They said, can you ride a horse? Yeah. Never ridden a horse in my life. Now, maybe want to do a dangerous thing like that. I mean, if you're afraid of horses and you've never ridden, it's probably not a good decision.
Right.
Just think you can. But I think that saying yes more than saying no. I mean, if you really know in your heart that it's not for you, you can say no. But I think a lot of stuff is happening. There's a lot of energy going on, and there are a lot of things coming your way without realizing it. You've got to recognize them and pull them into yourself. And don't be afraid to try something new. You never know. That might be your new thing. Who knows?
Yes, yeah. that yes could open up a whole new world for you.
Exactly.
Like they've done for you.
I was lucky, I'll have to say. Luck does play a part, but I think that you can kind of help luck along a little bit.
You got to be prepared. You got to be doing the work.
Yep.
And that's when the opportunities
Absolutely.
pop up. Yeah.
And it's also important to stay connected to people. I'm bad about that because I'm kind of an introvert. And so it'd be very easy for me to just kind of get lost in my house and read my book and
get lost in your voices.
Yeah. I do talk to myself, I must say.
In character?
No, but that's a good idea.
I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I think the more positive you can be, the better. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard. There are some days where it doesn't seem possible, but that's the time to shake yourself up. Just do something different. Get out of the house, go
do something. Yeah.
Yep, do something.
Well, thank you so much, Susan, for sharing your story of being the voice of Siri. And
well, thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
And for sharing your career. And that's very inspirational, the pivots you've done. And of course, thank you for being today's side hustle hero.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. And so did Siri. In fact, I'd like to say best wishes to all of your audience.
I love it. Be positive and embrace the change, Susan said. That mantra has served her well. After the shock of discovering that Siri was her voice and that there wasn't anything that she could do about it, she embraced it. And it propelled her into a brand new career as a public speaker, touring the world as Siri. There will be circumstances and events that happen in our life that maybe we're not happy about, but they're beyond our control. So we've got a choice. We can focus on those circumstances and events that we deem as negative and let them drag us down and agonize over them, or we can focus on the one thing that we always have control over, and that's our attitude, which is our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. When it comes to AI, I don't know what impact it'll have on our world years down the road, but already we've seen it disrupting and impacting many industries. There will be casualties and there will be winners, big winners. So let's be positive and embrace the changes so that we go through life as the winners. And as Susan put it, flip it to your advantage. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find a link to Susan's website and social media links on our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know you're listening and tell me how this podcast is helping you. You can tag me or send a DM on Instagram at Joan Posivy. Thanks for listening, and hustle on.